Welcome to Chasing the Horizon and Thinking About Harleys, a podcast by, for, and about people who think a lot about Harley Davidson, but would never think about buying one until after they heard episode 27, released on the 30th of July, 2018. Thanks for joining me. Welcome to Chasing the Horizon, brought to you by the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America. Subscribe through your favorite podcast player or app, or stream from the website at horizon.bmwmoa.org. Thanks for joining me and all our other regular listeners. Well, folks, I'll tell you this. I wasn't planning on putting out this episode for another week, at least. This morning, however, some news came to me in the form of an email from a friend that had me immediately scouring the internet for more information. And there it is, all over the place. Harley Davidson is getting into the adventure bike market. That's right, the orange and black is going to go for the dual end purpose, and the photos of the bike show a modern ADV-style bike complete with knobbies and what look to me like spoked tubeless rims. Now, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, perhaps even more so when it comes to ADV bikes. I certainly can't be that guy, the one that criticizes ugly bikes for being what they are, because I ride a BMW R1200 GS, which I happen to think is one of the ugliest bikes around. The Harley Davidson ADV bike is called the Pan America, and Harley says it will be out in 2020, and its looks are going to be an acquired taste, let's call it. But I mean, come on. Nobody is going to make an adventure bike narrower than the Africa Twin or more beautiful than the Multistrada. So if you ask me, Harley did the right thing in choosing function over form for this bike. We'll have to see what you think, so check out the show page at horizon.bmwmoa.org for photos of this bike. Along with the Pan America, Harley announced not one, but two other new bikes for 2020. And keep in mind that these bikes don't take away from their aggressive timeline for their all-electric bike, which is still slated for a 2019 release. The second of the 2020 bikes Harley announced is an all-new Street Fighter-style bike, though I'm not sure that's going to be the name of it. Harley is calling it an upright, naked Street Fighter-style bike. It's aggressive looking and definitely fits that style, but will it have more straight line power than a VMAX? Is there a point to building a Street Fighter nowadays that doesn't? Of course there is. Think about it. At its heart, Harley is a motorcycle company. Yes, they've been building more or less one style of bike for a really long time, but everybody changes. Everybody grows. Harley's just showing it's like the rest of us here, right? At any rate, the prototype Street Fighter showcases a brand new engine from Harley, and that, my friends, is the real news here. Since the demise of the V-Rod, Harley hasn't had a fully water-cooled large-capacity engine on showroom floors. But all the work they did on that V-Rod clearly paved the way for their research and development people to produce a brand new engine. The new engine is a 60-degree V-twin with a capacity of 975 cubic centimeters. If you're measuring in cubic inches, that's about 60 cubic inches, or the same size as Indian's smallest water-cooled Scout engine. Oversized cylinder heads hide the double overhead camshafts. Suspension up front is an upside-down fork and a monoshock out back, and of course, there's the belt final drive. The Street Fighter actually looks a lot like the Buells used to look, and of course, we all know Buell is a brand that Harley used to own until they shut it down in 2009. In addition to the 975cc engine, Harley also broke news of a bigger version, a 1250cc water-cooled engine, also with dual overhead cams. 1250cc's is about 76 cubic inches for those of you keeping score. This is the engine that will power the Pan America and the third of the new bikes announced for 2020 by Harley, the 1250 Custom. Harley says that these new bikes are the beginning of a bunch of new models that will come out between 2020 and 2022. Could we be looking at, gasp, Harley Sport Touring bikes? Harley Sport bikes? I mean, Harley does have a history with racing, though it's mostly been flat track and things like that. The great thing about all this news from Harley is it doesn't answer any of those questions. It only asks them. There are no technical specs, No details other than some tire sizes, and Harley's word that these bikes will be out in 2020. With their manufacturing ability, I have no doubt they'll hit that deadline, so don't sweat that. Your dealer, unfortunately, isn't going to have any more info on these bikes than you can find on the internet. And I wouldn't be the least bit surprised to see them leverage both engine sizes, the 975 and the 1250, into new bikes for all three of these new models, and for the prices to be a lot more competitive when compared to similar-sized bikes from other builders. Now, the email that I got this morning contains some information that I haven't seen in the breathless news articles and press releases that have been flying around for most of the day. Here's the other news from Harley that made its way to me. Oh, and if the fan who sent me this is listening, thanks for that email. I really appreciate it. Harley will have not 2, as I mentioned above, but 4 displacement choices for this new water-cooled platform, sized between 500 and 1250 cc's. What we're getting here with the Custom, Street Fighter, and Pan America is info and very little of it on just 2 of the sizes, the 975 and the 1250. I can easily see the other displacements being 500 and 750, replacing the existing street rod engines, which unfortunately aren't really all that spectacular. They're also planning a small displacement motorcycle under 500 cc's for sale in Asia. No doubt this is the engine that will be produced in their new plant in Thailand, and I wouldn't be the least bit surprised to see Harley ramp up a production site in India, where foreign motorcycles of all sorts are still subjected to a 100% import tariff. That's right, a bike that you can buy here in the United States for whatever price you pay for it is going to cost twice as much if you buy the same bike in India, since it isn't made there. Harley is also planning to expand its dealer network into urban areas with smaller storefronts around the world, combining this approach with a new e-commerce push to bring their brand and products to the doors of millions of people who haven't yet become customers. To fund all these changes and all these new bikes, Harley says they'll be engaging comprehensive cost reduction and reallocating previously planned investment money and other resources, including operating investment money, whatever that is, to the tune of up to $550 million, plus a capital investment of up to $275 million through 2022. I imagine that's on top of all of the millions of dollars they're going to be spending to shut down their production plant in Kansas City. Their projection is that all of these changes and new bikes will generate more than $1 billion, that's $1 billion with a B, dollars of incremental annual revenue in 2022 compared to their 2017 numbers. All of this is incredibly ambitious, and frankly, it's long overdue. I'm excited for them and excited to see what's going to happen in the next 5 years at Harley-Davidson. I mourned the destruction of Buell and the disappearance of the V-Rod, not because I owned them, but because I'm a fan of both diversity in the product line and chaos in the customer base. Frankly, I loved seeing Buell riders show up at Harley events and have hardcore Harley riders look at them like they had a third arm. Buell had such a hard road getting into Harley riders' minds, and it seemed like their dealers were just starting to get the hang of selling Buells when Harley pulled the rug out from under them. Now, with Harley's aging demographic, they'd have had to be insane not to come out with the new models like this. As I recently wrote in an article being published in August, having an adventure bike in your lineup is practically like printing money. My concern at this point for Harley is that they've jumped onto this bandwagon a little too late, and it's not going to be enough to save them in the long run. I hope it doesn't turn out that way, but it's certainly a concern. Harley CEO Matt Levitich addressed a lot of issues in an interview he did with CNBC. Check the show page to stream that interview and hear everything he had to say. It's about 13 minutes long. He talked about inspiring a new generation of rider, especially with their upcoming electric bikes, which I'll talk about in a minute. Levitich also said in the interview, to talk about Harley's trade environment in India, where, as I said before, all foreign motorcycles are subjected to a 100% import tax. He talked about the future of the motorcycle market in China, which is largely why Harley has built a manufacturing plant in Thailand. He stuck to his previous statement that Harley would prefer to make all of its bikes in the United States, but said that in the modern trade environment, it's simply not smart business to do so. Levitich said that overseas facilities will use the same methods, the same equipment, and the same approach to quality and safety that Harley's American facilities use, so that made by Harley-Davidson continues to mean something no matter where that item is actually produced. He started off the interview by saying Harley is going to double down on its existing products, so anybody who's concerned that the existing cruiser line is going to disappear in a puff of smoke can rest easy. Apparently, the cruisers aren't going anywhere, although I don't think it would be beyond the scope of reason to see these new bikes' water-cooled technology and modular chassis concepts reach back into the traditional model lineup. Levitich also mentioned electric bikes in his interview, which gives me a good opportunity to transition to those. Levitich also mentioned electric bikes in the interview, which gives me a good opportunity to transition to talking about those. What Levitich called twist and go riding, he likened to something that's easier to ride than a motorcycle, but better than a plain old bicycle. What he's talking about are several new two-wheeled prototypes, not including the Livewire electric motorcycle that is slated for release in August 2019. These things that he's talking about are little more than drawings right now, but they're exciting nonetheless. Imagine, if you will, an electric Harley-Davidson no bigger than a traditional bicycle. And it has pedals, too. Also, picture a flat-track-inspired electric motorcycle, inspired perhaps in part by Harley's partnership with Alta Motors and its flat-track history. Something like that would be an amazing commuter bike for urban and close-in suburban areas, not to mention the idea of electric flat-track racing. I'm already ready to pay my money to get tickets to go see electric flat-track racing. There are still people who cherish and purchase vinyl LPs to listen to and hard copy magazines to read. There will always be people to buy Harley-Davidson's traditional motorcycles. Always. But what the future holds for a company that cannot or will not diversify its product line is a future in which they sell a small number of nostalgic machines that appeal only to a specific niche of the population. I can't imagine a version of Harley that sells only 20 or 30,000 bikes a year, but if they don't ever change and modernize, that's exactly what they'll become. Who knows? Maybe the future will present to us a version of Harley-Davidson that sells a broad variety of motorcycles, and cruisers have become the smallest part of their sales numbers. It could happen. You never know. What remains to be seen is if Harley riders will buy adventure bikes, or if adventure bike riders will buy Harleys. That is the key question. Until we have the answer sometime in 2021, when the first sales numbers start coming in, I'm going to keep trying to get somebody from Harley on the show to talk about their future, whether that's gas or electric. That's going to be it for the news this time around. I can't even imagine what else I could add that's the equivalent of Harley-Davidson coming out with an adventure bike. There just isn't anything. I seriously checked the date to make sure I hadn't slept until April 1st and that there wasn't, and I looked out the window to make sure there wasn't a dude with horns and a pointy tail ice skating down my street this morning. Plus, with all the talk of Harley's electric bikes, they couldn't have set up this episode's guest any better if they'd tried. On our last episode, when I mentioned, when I had the discussion with Hammy Tan about scooters and the hardcore scooter life that is out there that goes under the radar for many of us, one of the news items I included was about Zero Motorcycles opening their very first exclusive dealership and drawing some additional investment funding. And I also included a link to a really excellent review of the brand new 2018 Zero FXS motorcycle written by Susanna Schick. Well, our guest today is Susanna Schick. So, hi, Susanna. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Wes. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. How's life treating you out there in California?
It's okay.
I think everybody kind of thinks of California as always having, other than the earthquakes and fires, of always having perfect weather. But you get weather just like everybody else, rain and snow and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, up in the mountains where it belongs, I was shocked when I moved to New York and there was snow in the city. I was like, what is that doing here? It's not supposed to be here. And But yeah, I mean, what we really have is a water crisis and an overpopulation crisis, But
Right.
other than that, it's great.
Well, those are things that eventually those problems will take care of themselves. If there's no more water, then the people will leave.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I just would hate to have to be a climate refugee.
Yeah. So obviously, I wanted to talk to you because of your extensive experience with electric motorcycles. But I'm interested to find out how you got into motorcycling in the first place. Like, what was your first experience on two wheels?
Well, my brothers both had dirt bikes, but of course I was not encouraged to do that. And my mom always said, "Oh, they're so dangerous. Stay off of motorcycles." And I always had an eye for motorcycles. And then when I was 14, my friend Rob Bond took me for a ride on the back of his Suzuki, and I was like, "I have to get one of these. I just have to get one of these. I don't care what it takes. I have to get a motorcycle." And so I spent the next year and a half working my parents over until they finally relented and got sick of hearing me and let me get a scooter, and we did, we used the old argument, "Oh, scooters are safer. It's just a little scooter. I will never get hurt on a scooter." Even though, they're more dangerous in California, especially in cities where, like LA, San Francisco, where I grew up, the law of the jungle applies. And so the bigger and more dangerous you look, the safer you are.
Sure.
And so, you go riding around on a little Vespa, nobody's going to give you any respect. And so, yeah, I mean, I started out on a Vespa and worked my way up to bigger and bigger bikes. And the whole history of all the motorcycles I've had since '85 is on my blog, pinkyracer.com. That's Pinky, like PINKYRACER, because my racing suit was pink and my hair was pink for 10 years. And so people just started calling me Pinky. And,
That's a little obvious for a nickname, but what are you going to do, right?
Yeah, I know it works.
So do you feel like, just to kind of touch on that and not to bust on your mom at all, because we all have moms and they all have their own opinions on how to keep us safe. But obviously you weren't discouraged by your mom and maybe even your brothers, not wanting you on those dirt bikes. So how did you translate that experience in your youth to developing the confidence you needed, even as a scooter rider when you first started out, to being on the road and being safe and being aware of your environment? How did you turn that around?
Well, it was just immersion. I mean, it was 1985. There was no internet. There was apparently MSF had just started, but I didn't know about it. So I bought a scooter from a guy, and he delivered it to the house. And I said, "So how do you work this thing?" And he's like, "We've never ridden a scooter before." I'm like, No. First time for anything. So there I am in front of my parents and this guy, operating a 4-speed Vespa for the first time. And I launch it into the bushes across the street.
Of course.
And then I rode around in first gear for 2 weeks because I was terrified that shifting in the second, I would pop the clutch again. And even though everybody told me you're not going to pop the clutch going into second, that only happens going into first, I was terrified. And so I rode around in first, and that first ride up the hill, I was like going like 10, 15 miles an hour, and it felt so fast. And plus there was no helmet law back then. So I'm like, wee. And so it wasn't until I had my best friend, I was like immediately riding around with my best friend on the back. Like we were going everywhere. And we were riding to the mall on this long straight road that's like one of those higher speed surface streets. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I need to shift. I need to get up to fourth gear. I mean, come on. There's two of us, and the speed limit's 40 miles an hour. And so I went up to fourth gear. Nothing happened. We got to the mall and it was great. And it was just, ever since then, I'm just going faster and faster.
So what inspired you to make the transition from your scooter to a motorcycle, to a larger vehicle?
Yeah. I mean, I think because, I was living in San Francisco, And I got a job as a scooter messenger because I really loved riding my scooter. And I was in school, but I did scooter messengering on the side. And I had friends who were motorcycle messengers. And plus, it's San Francisco, so all the cool kids are on BMWs and Ducatis and,
right.
Vintage bikes. And I'm like, wow, they're really cool. I want to be cool like them, so I bought a motorcycle from a friend of mine, a Suzuki GS 450. And I bought that, and then shortly thereafter, I moved down to Los Angeles, and it made a lot more sense having a motorcycle in LA because it's, more spread out than San Francisco, and, people aren't used to seeing bikes down here like they are in San Francisco, or they were in San Francisco. And so, yeah, I just got that bigger bike, and then I moved to Paris, and basically what happened is I had that bike, and then I was home visiting my family, and I was riding my old Lambretta, and I got hit by a car. It was the left turn. Yeah, it was my third crash, and it was my second crash getting hit by somebody when they're turning left,
Yeah.
And so with that one, this isn't about my crashes, but it's kind of like that's on my blog too. But that was a severe head injury. Like I had a severe concussion, hairline skull fracture. So after that, I was like, I'm going to wear my helmet all the time. And
good choice.
Yeah, and then also when a few months later, when I was finally ready to ride, I was riding my motorcycle in Los Angeles and feeling like I was going to crash all the time. Like I would just be like, that person's going to hit me, that person's going to hit me. And it was just this fear was constantly with me. And people weren't really talking about PTSD in 1990, but it was actually 91, 92. But that's what it was. It was PTSD.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do about it. So I was just like, well, I can't live in LA and drive a car because that's just stupid. And so I have to live someplace where they have good public transit if I'm not going to ride a motorcycle. And so I moved to Paris because, why not? And,
why not?
And finished my schooling there and moved to New York after that. And in New York, eventually I was like, I can't live in this city and not leave. You have to leave on the weekends or you go crazy. And so, because the people who never leave on the weekends, you can tell, like they're really out of it. And and so I got a motorcycle. I got a vintage Beamer to start just getting out of town on the weekends. And that's where I kind of, it was the R60/6, and then Ducati made an affordable Monster.
Yeah.
So I moved up to the Monster 750, and that was life changing. And
it was now all of a sudden you can go 100 miles an hour.
And it was a bike that could corner, and I was like, wow, this thing can corner. I should really learn how to actually corner a motorcycle. Like, where do you learn that? And I was like, well, there were a bunch of different options, but I chose to go to Penguin Racing School because I said, well, if I really enjoy learning how to, ride on the track, I may want to actually race. And this way I can get my license. And so I did their school. I did my first race, crashed, sort of got rear-ended at some weird corner. I was ridiculously slow on the racetrack. And so I crashed, and then I discovered how great a community club racing is.
Yeah.
And people were so helpful. And so, I got back into it, and then I got an Aprilia 250 because it was more suited for the track, and then worked my way up and,
So what led you from kind of that experience on the East Coast to the electric motorcycle experience on the West Coast? I mean, obviously you moved from New York back to California, but how did you get introduced to electric motorcycles?
Well, I made my way back to California after 9/11 because I wanted to be closer to my family. And then I was racing in Willow Springs, and then I got an R1, and I was like, oh, I'm not fast enough to race this. I'll just do track days. And the whole time I was coming back to LA, I was like, okay, sure, I'll have an R1, but I'm not going to ride it around town because that's just overkill. And but I did, because I didn't really have the money for a scooter to just have on hand. And I loved riding the R1, even though it hated sitting in traffic, and even squeezing through traffic on that bike is just not fun. And so then I became interested in sustainability. I went. I was kind of, after 9/11, I was thinking about what is it about trade that made people so angry, and why would they hit the World Trade Center and not some other building? And so I started looking at, what my industry, fashion, is doing in trade, and discovered how horrible it is, and also discovered a lot of things that are environmentally wrong. And decided to go to business school for an MBA focused on sustainability. So while I'm in business school, I'm learning about, electric vehicles and clean technology and all of these different things that were kind of, it was 2007 to 2009, so they were kind of just becoming a thing, right? And the movie Revenge of the Electric Car was 2008?
That was the one about the Honda, right? Yeah.
No, Revenge of the Electric Car was filmed in 2008, because Who Killed the Electric Car was filmed many years before, when there was the whole Honda CR-V thing that they scrapped. And so Revenge was really beautiful because it was Tesla was just starting, Nissan was getting into it, GM was getting into it, and it was following their paths. And so I didn't even know about that film yet, but I was learning about electric vehicles. And then I moved back to California, and in 2009, I took Zero had test rides at Laguna Seca at the MotoGP race. And so I said, I'll try one, see what it's like. And it was pathetic. It was really slow. And it was really sort of hobbled together. And I was like, yeah, this is cute, but, when they have a real motorcycle, then I'll get one for the city. And because they just would not survive LA traffic. You have to be so aggressive here. And so I actually wrote an article about it for Gas 2.0, because I was working at this incubator where, Gas 2.0 was one of the other companies at the incubator. And so I was, I sat across the table. I was like, hey, I test rode this electric motorcycle. You guys want an article on it? And they're like, yeah, sure. And they say, oh, you actually know how to write. This is good. So I've been writing for them. Right. I've been writing for them ever since. And so I've been testing Zero models every year since, and ridden a bunch of other electric vehicles as well. And of course, Zero's just gotten better and better every year, and it's really impressive. And as they've gotten better, they've also gotten cheaper.
Right.
And I have a little chart on that on my review about the FX, not the FXS, but the FX.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay, because I just put up the FX review this weekend, and the FXS review came up the weekend before. Okay. And so yeah, it's been really neat to see how electric vehicles have just gotten cheaper and better, and batteries are getting cheaper, and they're finding better places to source. And so, yeah, and it's just, I love riding it. I ride it every day.
So the impetus for the FXS review was you moved from your old electric bike to your new electric bike, the Toyota 2014, is that correct? And you went to a 2018?
It was a 2013. I had one of the first FX models. Okay. And because I was on the waiting list for a Bramo Impulse, and Harlan at Hollywood Electrics told me, just wait till you see what Zero has coming out for 2013. Don't pull the trigger just yet. Just wait, and I was, because he couldn't tell me anything more.
Right.
But he's like, just wait. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll wait. And then I took a FX for a spin around the block, and I was like, wow, this is actually a really fun bike. And so I went ahead and bought one. And he had converted it for another customer to a supermoto bike. So he converted mine. And so we had some of the first FXSs. And
cool.
They were FX with the S in brackets because they were modified.
Yeah,
and now,
unofficial.
right. And so now Zero saw that was a very popular modification. So they offer it in their lineup now. And so the 2013 was great, and I wanted to keep it forever. But then I took a 2018 for a spin, and I was like, oh, yeah, this handles so much better. And, like, you know, the build quality, the suspension, the brakes, everything's just better. And it's got more range, and, you know, so it's just like, fine, I'll upgrade.
Yeah, kind of a typical, you know, life cycle on a product, on a model. You know, it starts here and ends up there. I mean, I think everything does that. Everything improves over time except the KLR 650, which has stayed exactly the same for 112 years. So when you first started riding electric motorcycles regularly, every day, day in, day out, how did you manage the charging cycle? Like, were you able to get out, run around all day and only charge it up when you got home, that kind of thing? Or did you have to, like, plan your lunch stop near an outlet?
No, I mean, LA's a big city. It's like, you know, the square footage or square miles are huge, right? Yeah. And I never had problems. Like, I mean, most of I live on the east side. Most of my work is on the east side. Sometimes I have to go to the west side. Occasionally I would go to Long Beach. If I went to Long Beach, of course, I would have to plug in somewhere. Like when I would go to the Long Beach Motorcycle Show, there's an outlet right by the front entrance in the parking lot.
How convenient.
And I plug in there. Yeah, and I plug in there and I go check out the motorcycles and then go home. And so normally I just plug in at home. I have a extension cord running out my bedroom window, and that way my apartment, you know, it goes on my electric bill. And in Los Angeles, and I think in the whole state, but I'm not sure, apartment owners and condominium HOAs are required to allow people to charge in their parking lot.
Okay.
Like, so if they provide parking, they have to allow people to charge in their parking. And so I just ran an extension cord outside, and that's been fine. And I was using the same extension cord for the Fiat 500e I had for a week. And that one was a little hard to charge with other things running, like the fuse would blow. But the Zero, I've never had a problem with the fuse blowing. You know, usually, like, just to go work downtown or Vernon, it's like 7 miles each way. And so I barely get, like, last night I had an errand downtown, and it was no traffic. It was crazy. I was like, how is there no traffic on the 5? This is unusual. And so I was going really fast and, like, close to top speed. And it took like 15% to go 7 miles. And so that's, you know, more than usual, because of course the slower you go, the further you can go.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, normally it's not a problem. I've only run out of juice like once or twice, and that one time was when I was really pushing it to see like how far I could go. Yeah. And you know, like I had a job out in Calabasas for a little while. That was because I worked freelance, and so with that job, like they really didn't have any place for me to plug in, and they couldn't let me run an extension cord out to the parking lot, you know, because of liability issues. And so I just had to ride my gas bike there, which is fine. You know, a reverse commute on R1 out to Calabasas is actually really fun.
Yeah, I bet. So, yeah, and it's not exactly torture to have to, you know, pull your R1 out of its parking space and go.
Yeah.
So how does what's a, you know, like I've actually ridden a Zero, a couple of different ones there. The feeling of that linear acceleration is just unbelievable. It's really hard to describe, you know, because you don't have to shift. It just keeps going and going and going. It'll keep going faster until you've panic and let off the throttle. So I kind of have a feeling of how electric motorcycles operate and how they feel a little bit, at least the Zeros. But what I'm curious about is, what is maintenance like on an electric motorcycle? Because you don't have to change the oil, do you? I mean, obviously, you're going to have to maintain the suspension. You're going to have to adjust the suspension. You might have to change the fork oil or adjust the springs or, that kind of thing. But as far as general maintenance of an electric motorcycle, what's involved?
It's almost zero maintenance. That's what I love about it. It's like, because I hate working on bikes. I hate maintaining anything. Like, I really hate it. And I've done a motorcycle maintenance class. It was a really great class. Had a great teacher. After the class, we became good friends, and we took my Monster apart because I wanted the frame a different color.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, it was insane. And I'm never doing that again. And 2 years later, Ducati copied that color.
Did they
black
really?
With the black with the slight metal flakes, and they're like, "Oh, that's a good color. Let's do that." So in any case, I don't like working on vehicles, and so the Zero, I have to remind myself, oh, it's been a year. Gee, maybe it's time for fork oil, and gee, the brake fluid's looking a little dark, and so it's like one of those things that it's very low maintenance. I mean, I bought a spare belt for my 2013, never needed it in 5 years. In 5 years on the 2013, I went through 2 sets of tires. The second set, I'm like, it's just they're light, so they don't really go through tires the way the R1 does. And the only issue with Zero is being a small company and being at the forefront of the technology. Sometimes things happen, and but they're really good about covering stuff under warranty. And so if customers reach out to them directly or reach out to their dealership, sometimes the dealerships, like Hollywood Electrics, is always 120%. Like, they've got it. They're owned by an electrical engineer. Like, Harlan is an electrical engineer.
So he
first,
definitely gets it.
Yeah. And a dealership owner second. And so, they can fix a lot of stuff that might, go wrong or whatever. And so, but then if the dealership near somebody doesn't really understand it that well, then customers can reach out to Zero, and their customer service has always been stellar.
Yeah, I've talked to a couple of people, with Zero Corporate, and, always gotten. They call back right away, and they're very polite, and they know what they're talking about, and they know what they're doing. So I'm hoping in the future to have somebody from Zero on the show, and learn a little bit more about how the company operates. So when it comes to electric motorcycles, now obviously you have the benefit of being in an urban area that, even though LA is very large and is very spread out, it's still, it's built up. It's, 100% first world, situation. There's electricity almost everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I can plug in anywhere, literally anywhere. I've plugged in at a store, just they had an outlet, and I'm like, because I was coming back from plug-in day in Santa Monica on one of the older Zeros that I borrowed from Harlan, and I'm like, yeah, this thing ain't going to make it back to Hollywood Electric. So
how do you see electric motorcycles conquering the countryside, where distances are bigger, it's farther between electrical outlets? What do you think the electric motorcycle industry has to do to really truly expand out of the urban and suburban areas?
See, I don't think that's that important, because I feel like in America and in the world in general, most people live in cities. Most of the jobs are in cities. And, then there's people who can't afford to live in cities, so they have to live in suburbs. And if they, live in suburbs, then, that's something that's a commute distance, 20, 25 miles, is worth it for electric motorcycles to serve, because that's where the densest traffic is. And I think the most important aspect or the most important value of motorcycles right now is to reduce traffic. It's also to go out and have a great time in the canyons, but like in America, we've been doing that all along. Like
right.
We've always thought, oh, motorcycles are just a toy. They're for having fun on the weekends. And what America needs to do is shift their mindset away from just a toy to, oh, I could actually enjoy more time with my family because I can get to work and get home faster than I can in my car. And, someone may love taking their, Road King out on the weekends or their R1 or whatever, but that's not really a fun bike in traffic. And I think more states would be willing to adopt lane sharing if, more motorcyclists were asking for it. Because I think a lot of motorcyclists don't see it as something they can actually do. Maybe they've never been to Rome. I don't know. I've ridden scooters in Rome, and it was awesome. And It's like you can just, cities move. When people can ride two wheels, there's just so much less traffic. And when people are just lane splitting through, like I got pulled over for lane splitting past a cop in North Carolina, and I was like, are you kidding me? Yeah, I know it's not legal everywhere else, but I mean, come on, I lived in New York for 8 years, lane split past plenty of cops, and they had much more important things to deal with than motorcyclists, not wasting space.
Yeah.
And so I think that more motorcyclists in America need to start thinking about, like, how can I get to work more easily? Because there are other American cities with severe traffic problems, like Atlanta. Atlanta is a great place to ride a motorcycle, but you can't lane split there, and the traffic is insane, and there's like not really much in the way of public transit. So, and there's a lot of motorcyclists in Atlanta, and like they should be like petitioning the state of Georgia to say, hey, look, at least in urban areas, make this okay, because, why do you want everybody sitting in their cars all day? They could be like, getting to the mall earlier and doing more shopping. Like, come on.
Well, and I live in Virginia, and I live near the state capitol, very close to the state capital of Richmond. Mm-hmm. And every couple of years, there's another bill that somebody submits that wants to allow filtering, lane splitting, whatever you want to call it. And it never even makes it out of committee. It never even gets to the floor of the legislature for a full vote. I think a lot of states have that problem where they just can't see past the toy aspect of a motorcycle. Yeah. When I look at a motorcycle's specifications, I'm looking for 200-mile tank range, which is has honestly been part of my hesitance to, even though I'm very excited about electric motorcycles and electric technology, I've been very hesitant to buy in, because I have trouble getting past that. I have to be able to go 200 miles on one tank or one charge.
So your job is 200 miles away?
No, actually,
it's not.
I work out of my house, so my commute is up the stairs.
But even if you had a job, your job would not be 200 miles away from home. Right. It's the weekend rides that are 200 miles, and absolutely, you should be able to go on a nice long trip. Now, that's what's great about, there's an app called Riders Share, or website, riders-share.com, where people can rent out their motorcycles. So my R1 is available on there if people want to ride it, because I hardly ever ride it. Weekends, I like to go mountain biking. I used to use my weekends to go play in the canyons, and that's like 100-mile day. Going out to Malibu, riding around the canyons, that would absolutely be 100 miles. And I don't expect my electric motorcycle to be able to do that. I expect my electric motorcycle to do the majority of my rides, which is to work and back or around town, going to the grocery store, all that stuff. So it's like, people are expecting one bike to do everything, and yet there's a lot of really passionate motorcyclists that have more than one bike. And, like one of my friends says, actually Robert Pandya says, you wouldn't take a Road King flat tracking now, would you? No. No. You like have the right tool for the job. And so Zero doesn't publicize their motorcycles as urban commuters because they want to be cool. Like, it's like, I kind of feel like the Zero brand is like this nerdy, science geek that's like, wants to hang out with the cool kids and like, well, look, I go on motorcycle rides too, I have a motorcycle just like you, I'm really cool, and like, really I'm cool, and like, dude, you're really cool in town, okay? Like, own that. Just own it. Like, it's cool to be cool in town, okay?
Yeah.
And
well,
and you're not really seeing that.
I absolutely get what you're saying. And like, obviously that's a little bit of a mental block for me too, because, I have my main motorcycle is an R1200 GS. I'm not an off-road rider. I've got it set up as a touring bike. But when my wife or my daughter wants to go someplace with me, or we want to get away for the weekend, I bust out my sidecar rig because it's more comfortable.
Yeah.
It's it's got the auxiliary fuel tank and the additional storage if we want to take off for a week or a weekend or whatever. And I definitely look at my motorcycles as having different purposes. So obviously what I need to work on is being able to look at an electric motorcycle and think, okay, when I've got to go into the city and do this, when I've got to run errands, when I've got to go pick this up and go to the post office and blah, 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 that's the perfect opportunity for an electric motorcycle. It's light, it's easy, it's maneuverable. I can get it out of the garage very quickly and get down the road. And I don't have to, check the oil, and I don't have to, did I put an air filter in it last week? And, you check the tires, you make sure the suspension isn't bottoming out, and you turn the key and you go.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think one of the things and that's another reason why I wanted to talk to you and get you on the show, is to kind of get that perspective on electric motorcycles that I don't have. One of the things somebody asked me something about the show weeks ago, and I said that my goal is to talk to people who know things that I don't, so that I can become a more well-rounded motorcycle rider and know more about the industry that I'm part of. Yeah. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about electric motorcycles, because I think it's hugely important, and it's not going to go away. Yeah,
exactly. And that's the thing too, is it's not just for like saving money on gas and having like really super fun torque, which is like so much amazing, fun every time I take off. It's also like quiet and calm. Like my R1 sounds like the angriest bike in the world, and it's not even the angriest sounding bike out there. It's like I get on it and it's like rah, 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 rah. It's like, okay, calm down, we're almost there. And so and plus even just keeping it sitting for too long, there's maintenance that needs to be done. It's like, Jesus, really? Like, apparently if you don't use the brakes that often, they get air bubbles. And I'm like, wow, okay, so now I have to get the brakes bled. And then it's like, oh, this and oh, that. And it's like the Zero, it's just always there. It's always ready to go. And I have a Givi top box on it. So, yeah, it's the grocery getter. Like, Zero hates that term, but too bad.
It works.
Because you know what? Yeah, it's like I don't have to drive the car and make it real in the Whole Foods parking lot like that video, I just roll in, park wherever I want, get what I need, and get out. And it's so handy that way.
So have you been following at all the Harley Davidson news about their future electric motorcycle?
Yeah, I rode one at the motorcycle show in Long Beach a few years ago.
Oh, really?
And I wrote a story about it. So if you look on Clean Technica, no, not on Clean Technica, it's on Gas 2.0.
Gas 2.0. I'll find it and put the link in the show notes.
Yeah, gas2.org. If you look on there, I'll send you my author archives there, because there's a lot more EV stuff on there that I've written in the past. It's like lately... editorial is transitioning more to the blog Clean Technica. And so, but in the past I've written a lot at Gas 2.0 as well. And so, your question about the Harley. Yeah, the Harley, we just took it for like a little guided tour around Long Beach. And, it was fun. It was comfortable. It was, a nice bike. And what's interesting about it is that it had room for far more batteries. I mean, not far more, but it definitely has room for more batteries. So they made sort of a base model with not the most battery capacity possible. So that's something to show that, like, they're thinking in terms of more range,
Right.
than what they offer. And so hopefully they actually will come through with it. I actually, even though it's interesting because it's like they know that their core market is aging out and they need to figure out a way to get young kids interested in their brand because it is their grandpa's motorcycle, and who wants to ride your grandpa's motorcycle? So it's something like, oh, what can we do to get the young kids interested? Well, they like technology. Here's technology. And so it will be interesting to see once Honda and Yamaha, and I guess Kawasaki and Suzuki, but I really see Yamaha doing this first. Once they start offering an electric motorcycle and not just some moped, then where will Harley stand? And then where will Zero stand? Because when you get like the major OEMs on board, because once batteries get cheap enough, they're definitely going to sign on.
I think the majors have hesitated a little bit and kind of let companies like Zero and Alta kind of take the hit on the battery technology R&D cycles. That they're, compromising or co-opting what how the hardware Zero has done, but they've waited for a good long time to make sure the technology is feasible and sustainable and supports a profit model, frankly.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing is it has to be a battery that's going to be reliable and powertrain that's going to be reliable. Plus it has to be cheap enough. And it still isn't quite cheap enough, but it's getting there. Lithium-ion batteries just keep getting cheaper as, mining operations are kind of coming on up to speed,
Right.
Because for so many years, they were just making tiny little phone batteries. And so now it's like, oh, we need to make big batteries? Okay. Tesla opened their Gigafactory a short distance from one of the biggest lithium deposits in North America. They're like, oh, there's all this lithium in Nevada. Let's just open a Gigafactory down the street, And then actually down the street is a highway that they paid or helped pay to, or I think the state made the highway for them because they're like, hey, we're going to bring all these jobs in manufacturing. Can you give us a highway to that lithium deposit? And so it works out really well. And that they're not the least bit interested in doing anything for motorcycles, and their batteries are not as energy dense as Zeros, because Zeros have to be more energy dense because it's smaller.
Well, and that's one of the things that I've admired about Zero for a long time is that a lot of I mostly ride BMWs, and while BMW motorcycles have a reputation for being kind of on the front edge of motorcycle technology, a lot of their technology comes down from the car side, that's developed on the car side, and then it gets, made compact and it gets sized for a motorcycle. So it still does what it's supposed to do, but they have to figure out, how to make an ABS pump that fits under a motorcycle seat rather than one that you can bolt to the side of the inside of the engine compartment. Where Zero has kind of gone the other direction. They've tried to start as small as possible and only done things as large as they absolutely had to. Because it's a motorcycle. They started with the whole motorcycle concept in place. So I've always admired them for that. Well, listen, Susanna, it's been really great talking to you about electric motorcycles and your life on two wheels. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us here at Chasing the Horizon, and I hope to hear more from you. In the show notes, I'll put links to some of your articles and stuff like that. And you mentioned your blog earlier. I'll put that link in there as well. And I hope you have a great time with your new Zero, and I look forward to talking to you about it sometime again soon.
Cool. Thanks so much, Wes.
By way of enticing you, maybe just a little bit, to join the MOA, I'm going to tell you a little bit about one of our events and what's happening at it. We do these things on the weekends called MOA getaways. And at each of the remaining MOA getaways in 2018, the MOA will be giving away a set of Continental tires of the winner's choice. That's valued up to $425. And a Scala Rider Pack Talk Bold Duo communications system, valued at $579. These will be given away as door prizes, along with other items and MOA gear worth hundreds of dollars to attendees. I already said door prizes, but I'll say it again, as door prizes. To win these things and experience the fantastic camaraderie of the MOA, register for a getaway and then come hang out with your friends, old and new, during the Saturday night dinner. We will draw winners until all the prizes are given away. Fall getaway locations include Eureka Springs, Arkansas, Copper Mountain, Colorado, Pine Mountain, Kentucky, Sedona, Arizona, Jay Peak, Vermont, Toma, Wisconsin, and Kerrville, Texas, out in the hill country. For more information or to register for one of the getaway events, visit bmwmoa.org and click on the Events tab. There has never been a better time to attend an MOA weekend getaway. Don't forget to check in with me by getting connected to one of the show's social media feeds, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and especially by checking out the website at horizon.bmwmoa.org. You can also email me at podcast@bmwmoa.org or get on the mailing list at tinyletter.com/chasingthehorizon. If I can get somebody from Harley-Davidson to talk to me about all these new bikes and ideas, I'll put another episode out in a week or two. Otherwise, you may not hear from me again until Season 2 starts. Now, there's a lot on deck for Season 2 of the show, including new music, new logos, a new URL, and most especially, new guests. I'm going to be kicking off Season 2 with Motorcycle Manufacturer Month. Starting on Monday, September 3rd, 2018, there will be 4 weekly episodes featuring discussions with 2 different motorcycle builders. The first 2-part episode features Matt Chambers, the head of Curtis Motorcycles, and the second 2-parter features Brian Case, co-founder and lead designer for Modus Motorcycles. Beyond that, we're going to be doing a lot of talk about travel this year, and I've got interviews from people who have traveled all over the world and all over the country, from all over the world and all over the country, and it's going to be really exciting. Thank you for coming back for the 27th episode of Chasing the Horizon, which featured a discussion with Susanna Schick of Clean Technica, gas2.org, and other content outlets. Stay tuned for our next episode in August or September. Thanks again to all our guests and listeners for giving us their time. We'll see you out there somewhere on the road. Or off it. Ride safe.